Welcome, my friends, to Career Coffee Chat Live. I'm your host, E.Urban, and I'm thrilled to have you join me today about a conversation around some of the biggest leadership myths. So come on in and join me to discover the reasons why so many leaders rarely lead, and most importantly, what you can do about it. Now, as you tune into the show, feel free to say hi, share where you're from. I'd love to welcome you to the show today. And if you have a comment, insight, or an aha moment, don't be shy. Feel free to comment, ask questions. After all, this show is for you, my friends. And after the show, you can pop over to YouTube and subscribe to be the first to know about upcoming live shows and events just like this one. The challenge today, coming back to the biggest leadership myth, the challenge today is, particularly now with leaders, is they rarely get to actually lead. So as you tune into this show, I'd love to hear what roadblocks and obstacles you experience as a leader, or what you're seeing other leaders struggle with the most. It was very interesting. We are in a very strong change cycle. If any of you heard me speak at all before, you know that this change cycle has been going on for a number of years, and a lot of this is made or exacerbated by the pandemic. What's very interesting in our American culture is we like to forget that there was a pandemic or gloss it over, because in America, we're like, oh, yeah, the pandemic thing. Well, we got to work past this. We're what next people. Let's keep going. And I would love for you to take time today to acknowledge that that has made a significant impact, not only in how we work or what we're seeing in the workplace, an emphasis on different priorities for employees and teams and ourselves, but also, most importantly, something that we call disaster fatigue. So before we launch into our topic around the biggest leadership myths and what holds leaders back from actually being able to lead and do what you want to do and get clarity around how to evolve your role and latch on to professional success, I'd love for us to understand, first of all, some of what we're experiencing boils down to something called disaster fatigue. So tune in if you've ever heard of this, pop a comment in or say yes, say, hey, I get where you're coming from. Disaster fatigue is an actual thing. And almost everybody has it, regardless of where you're from, what country you are tuning in from around the world. I want to say hi to a couple of folks tuning in. Speaking of, good to see you, Cornelia. It's tuning in from Spring, Texas today. And oh, wow, we have somebody from Maryland. Great to see you tuning in from Maryland. Thanks for joining. And again, as you're tuning into the show today, share what roadblocks you're experiencing or you're seeing leaders experience and struggle with the most. Now, some of this, as I mentioned, is disaster fatigue. We have been through a pandemic and still kind of going through a pandemic for a number of years. That's not something we can just write off, because the human brain and body react so strongly to prolonged periods of stress. You will and may have already felt an impact on yourself and the teams around you. Lack of motivation, inability to focus, creativity and innovation taking a hit. All of these are part of it. Why? Because our brains are stressed and tired. And what we're not allowing ourselves to do is actually take that time to recuperate those energy losses. Now, the good news is, for those of you tuning in from around the world, is this will pass and we will heal and we will move forward. And I encourage you again to consider what you can do in the interim to put energy back into yourself. Now, what about these big leadership myths, Aaron? Well, some of these actually tie into what I just talked about. Unfortunately, some of these leadership myths are fading, such as leadership is all about self-aggrandizing, and rather than realizing leadership really isn't about you, it's about the people that you lead and for them. Now, on the other hand, quite honestly, many companies still are slow to provide leadership training and ongoing development for emerging and established leaders. And as a result, without training, most people model their leadership style after what they've seen, for better or for worse. Some are more self-aware and model their leadership style, want to avoid what they've seen. So let me know if that resonates with you. You're like, oh, yes, I see what you're doing. I'm not doing that. But let's tackle one of the biggest and most common leadership myths, particularly for people who consider themselves team focused leaders, supporters of your team. That myth is leadership is all about other people. Oh, what? Did this surprise you? If you follow the servant leader model, this probably got your attention. The problem with believing that leadership is all about other people is you miss the number one most important first step in leadership, leading yourself. Yes, leading yourself is actually much harder than leading other people. And self awareness is critical for effective leadership, particularly now. Most people, if they skip this step, they skip self awareness, and if they're lucky, they shift right into being other focused. Well, you think that would be great. And it is better than a lot of other leadership models. However, if you skip both self-awareness and other focus, that's a whole nother story. Now, the importance of self-awareness is essential for supporting and evolving your ability to lead others. It's the foundation of self-management, emotional intelligence, and as I mentioned before, self-leadership. After all, how many times have you told yourself, oh, I've got to do something, and you don't do it? Now, if you were leading you, what would you say about yourself? So understanding and developing your people skills, that is critical to leadership, absolutely, but not in the absence of developing yourself. Okay? My friends, this might be an opportunity if you helpfully focus on other people's well-being and self-care, yet rarely focus on your own, or you spend more time understanding your team than understanding yourself or how to even show up for your team 100%. You may even spend more time firefighting than your environment actually warrants, which depletes your energy and exhausts your team. Now, here's a few examples. So let me know if any of this resonates with you at all, or if you've seen this. Again, as you tune in, I'd love to hear what are some top roadblocks you're experiencing, because after all, this show is for you. Now, let's take Samantha, for example. She loves her team. She invests in supporting her team. Yet, let's be honest, she doesn't take the time to understand herself better or really invest in herself. She's very other focused, which is, you would think, great. As a result, even her most well-meaning efforts are a little bit more of a struggle than necessary. She doesn't fully comprehend why her team feels misdirected, and in her mind, she communicates the direction, and in actuality, she's rather vague and doesn't really set clear expectations for the outcomes because she doesn't want to inhibit anyone. And she's frustrated, and her team is more anxious than necessary. Now let's take Tom. Tom is a very high strung perfectionist. He's a high achiever. And he's very self aware, he says, but he really doesn't put any time into it. Now, while he thinks he supports his team, he's not really aware enough to realize that his tone of voice, for example, doesn't align with his intent. So his presence isn't necessarily in alignment with who he wants to be. And he has low morale. His team feels like they never measure up. And of course, these names are protected for client confidentiality reasons. But a gap in self awareness, as you can see, really does affect your ability to develop your executive presence in line with who you actually are. And typically, you default to your automatic habitual behaviors in combination with your role. Some of these behaviors might be great, and others maybe not so much. Now, if we're all very honest with ourselves, chances are we know of a couple behaviors that maybe don't necessarily serve us. Take, for example, oh, I know I don't listen as much as I should. I need to work on that. And it becomes a part of your identification. Oh, yes, I'm so and so. I don't really listen as much as I should. And then we don't really focus on it. So there might be an opportunity there. But a gap in self awareness affects not only your ability to develop that executive presence, but it also impacts your ability to influence others the way you would like. And as a result, it makes efforts here much more complicated than necessary. In addition, it can also lead to misunderstandings, a lack of clear career, easy for me to say, a lack of clear career path, and a general feeling of misalignment. which can be frustrating. Even if you're not sure how to articulate why you're frustrated, the chances are there is a misalignment there. Typically, that frustration is a result of some sort of friction, and that friction is typically caused because of misalignment. Now, what you can do to help evolve your self-awareness, because you might be thinking to yourself, oh gosh, Erin, yeah, this is great. Time, hello. I hear you. Now, here's what you can do. Seek feedback from others. What? Feedback? Yes, chances are your company even probably has a process or a software that they already use to get feedback. Anonymous feedback is best because that allows people to truly speak their mind and what is beneficial and helpful for you. But seek feedback. And the reason you want to seek feedback is several reasons. One, you're not getting feedback whether you like it or not. And in those situations, chances are you may get some feedback that might not align with how you see yourself, and how you process that feedback may not be as valuable as otherwise. When you seek it out, your ability to process that feedback is much more readily and much more accepting. Now, I'm not saying that all feedback is made equal. To be fair, some of it, we need to use some discernment there and understanding what feedback can be valuable to us. And let's face it, my friends, we grow from feedback. How did we learn and evolve as a young human? Well, we fell down and then we learned how to walk. That's feedback. And in an absence of feedback, that actually inhibits our growth. And as I shared in my best-selling book, feedback literally changed my life for the better. And if it wasn't for that feedback, which, by the way, I did not want to hear, I may not be here talking to you today. I might be somewhere stuck in a corporate cubicle, miserable and hating my job because I didn't have the clear career clarity or the self-awareness. Until that time, I was totally unself-aware. I had no idea that how I acted even mattered. I thought I was doing the right thing, being super professional. It basically put people off. But I didn't know that until I got feedback. Seeking it out is tremendous. I can't say enough about it. In fact, if you don't do anything else, just do that. And if you don't have a structure in place and you're going, well, yeah, we're kind of a small company and don't really have that. Okay, here's what you do. Chances are, like I said, you probably know something that you might need to work on, whether it's listening more or speaking up more. People are usually on one of those two spectrums. You can go to people that you value their expertise, you know that they'll give you valid and clear feedback, and ask them, hey, so-and-so, I'm working on becoming a better listener. What's a couple top tips you have? They know you. They'll probably give you a couple top tips. And here's the deal. You listen, you write them down, you say thank you. You don't rate, judge, qualify, or anything else. You just say thank you and implement what makes sense to you. That's a great way to do what I call feed forward versus feedback, which is something that happened in the past and may not even apply if your company doesn't do performance reviews more than once a year. But seeking feedback is extremely important and helps us get an idea from someone else's perspective. How am I actually showing up? Here's the thing. You think you know how you're showing up. That may or may not be in alignment with what other people see because we're blind to our blind spots, but other people aren't. Here's another one. You drive your credibility, but you don't determine it. Other people do. Another thing we can do is understand what those work style and personality tests are telling you, even if you need to get certified to do it. I know the DISC, the Myers-Briggs, the Berkman, oh yeah, I remember something, I had some colors. Nobody uses them. Why? Because no one ever sat you down and told you, hey, did you realize that a few tweaks, the conversation with so-and-so, that person that you don't actually get along with, would understand you a lot better and you would have more influence and impact during the conversation, get better results. Yes, that's what those things can actually do. And understanding them is absolutely critical. It's one of the things I do with all my clients. Now, do we go through every minute detail? No, but I do help them understand a couple things. One, it gives you a lot of clarity around what types of roles serve you and which ones will drain your energy. And two, it gives you a lot of clarity around how to deal with those people that you just don't see eye to eye with and can't figure out, like, are they from another planet? What's going on with them? Not quite sure. Those people are probably polar opposites on your work style. It's not that they're bad people. Most people don't come to work going, oh, let's see what I can screw up in Sandra's world today. No, that's not what they're doing. They probably have good intentions. And again, their intentions based on how they communicate and for information, et cetera, may not align with how you want to see it or are used to getting that information or communicated. So, take for example, if you're a processor and somebody barrels into your office like me, hey, so that's so and so. What is your idea about that? And you're like, first time I heard about it, and can I have like a couple of days to think about this? Like, go away. Or if you're on the opposite of the spectrum, and you're like, you really need that answer. So you're that person who's barreled into this person's office, and you're like, gosh, what's wrong with them? We really need this. Why are they dragging anchors? Why are they being so resistant? They're resistant to everything. Then we started making a lot of assumptions. So, personality test. Yes. Do we use them? No. Why should we? Because it helps us understand other people better and ourselves. So we can avoid some of those big red flag moments that may cause a lot of heartache and misunderstanding and judgment that is totally unnecessary. Right? Save energy. Good. The other thing you can do is connect with a coach. I know I'm totally biased about that. An experienced mentor or a peer group that can help you evolve, because it's great to get that reflection and insight from other people. So pop a note in the comments if you're watching now live or listening to the replay later, if this is something you've been able to connect to, or if you have another idea or experience that allowed you to really open a door into your own self-awareness that helps you tremendously. I'd love to hear from you. Because my friends, these steps are important because after all, we're blind to our blind spots, but other people aren't. And you cannot grow something you don't know. Speaking of, this leads me to the next and most popular leadership myth. Leaders must work harder than everyone else. Now, why is this the most popular leadership myth? Because in America, ladies and gentlemen, we are a work hard culture. This drives a lot of very unfortunate behaviors and limiting beliefs. Now, for those leaders, using the term loosely, that believes leadership or management is for everyone else to work harder than you, this is also not the answer. As in most things, balance is required. So neither one is the answer. I have to work harder than my team, or I work less than my team. Not the answer. A balance is required. And you'll find that in most things, as you get more candles on your birthday cake, that's the case. Balance. You can eat chocolate, just don't eat 5 chocolate bars, right? So there's a myth why this work hard leadership myth is harmful, okay? Let's just say that you're a leader that invests in supports your team. You believe they deserve to focus on their well-being, and you're an advocate for that as well. However, it's rare that you practice it yourself. You, the leader, set the behavioral expectations for your team. Isn't that fun? Yes, and it's also one of the reasons why it took me a while to accept leadership, because I was selfish. Just being honest. I knew that I was setting the tone for the team's behavior. Everything I did was under some level of scrutiny. So that's a lot of pressure. When you say, yes, well-being is wonderful, I support well-being, self-care, yada, yada, but you rarely practice yourself, the message you're clearly sending counteracts your support for said healthy work-life balance. And there's other repercussions as well. In fact, in one of my Forbes articles, Why Leaders Struggle with Well-Being and How to Break the Cycle, one of my clients said, quote, I completely understand that my direct reports need a break for well-being purposes. I just don't feel it's accessible to me because of my responsibilities, unquote. This statement set off my mental alarm bells, as I shared in the article, and I went on to say, you, the leader, cannot give what you don't have. Well-being is no longer a luxury for leaders. It's a requirement to survive during volatile, uncertain, and challenging and ambiguous times. Or VUCA, if you're familiar with that term. You are the fulcrum of your team or even the business itself. You cannot exclude your well-being in your leadership strategy. The impact could be actually literally disastrous, because if you don't practice some form of well-being, and we're going to get the train momentarily, you'll be glad to know, ladies and gentlemen, here live on Career Coffee Chat, we will also get a train. So the impact can be disastrous if you don't have that healthy work-life balance and include your well-being strategy. Because if stress exists for a long enough period of time, there will be negative consequences. See, the train said so. Characteristics of these negative behaviors also include, in all seriousness, lack of listening, over analysis. So if you get stuck in analysis paralysis, not quite sure what to prioritize, etc. Failure to make decisions. Erratic, fearful, or angry emotional decision making. By the way, I'll pop a link to that in the show notes, both on YouTube and on LinkedIn, so you can get contact with that article, read that in more detail. Because I share a few tactics how you can embed well-being into your day, less than 5 minutes, 3 times a day. Seriously, it does not take that much time. Now, your brain will tell you, oh my God, I don't have time to do this. Everybody has 5 minutes. You do too. I did something. I admit, hey, I get caught up in the busy cycle too. I'm a human. I live in America, all right? So we're work hard people. I get caught up on it too. And I know that I need to do my 5 minutes of yoga and just mindfulness in the morning. Kind of been putting it off. What happens? Struggle to prioritize, struggle to listen, think clearly. I said, okay, this morning I'm taking the 5 minutes. What happened? Well, I feel better. I'm more focused. I can make better decisions. And it took 5 minutes. Did the world fall apart because I took 5 minutes to do that? No, it didn't. So I think it's important to understand that you don't have to prove yourself as a leader. You don't have to prove your worth as a leader. And if that's you, there's a whole other conversation behind that. But a lot of us feel like we do have to prove our worth, so we work harder than we should. You also set the standard of behavior. So that's very important to recognize this. You can say whatever you like. Your team will adjust its priorities based on your actions. And they will do this subconsciously. In fact, it's very interesting. Some research has been proven to show that people are very likely to conform to their leaders' behaviors or align with them, even if they are consciously averse to them. Yeah. So my challenge for you today, my friends, is what small action can you take to bring a healthy balance back into your life? If you do, this resonates hugely with you. Yes, oh my gosh, I've got so much going on. I'm so stressed. What can you do? One small thing. Like I said, it took me 5 minutes. The world didn't fall apart. Nothing blew up. Everything was fine. And how do I feel? A lot better. And I'm going to take another 5 minutes at lunch too, just to be. And it's really important to do this 3 times a day. And the reason it is because it does several things. And you can practice it several different ways. You can do breathing techniques. You can do mindfulness. You can focus on a physical sensation and all absence of thinking to help focus your awareness in your body, because your body's always present, right? And it's kind of like hitting the reset button on your brain. Another thing it does, it helps your brain clear the cache, so to speak, get more clarity and focus throughout the day. And that way, at the end of the day, you go, oh man, I should have done whatever it was and I didn't. Gosh, now I have to stay up till 9 to get that accomplished. What happened? How did I get derailed? You got derailed because you didn't have those clarity moments throughout the day. And here's some other things you can do right away to help you, my friends. Do a quick cost benefits analysis on the activities that take a lot of your time during the day. So if these activities are taking up a lot of time, do a cost benefits analysis. Do they need to be done? Do they need to be done by you? Now, I'm not an advocate for dumping everything on your team, because if you are like a lot of people, you may be understaffed, you don't have enough resources. I'll get to that in a moment. This may be more of a challenge for you, and you feel like, well, let me pick up the slack. Or maybe you have an underperformer. Ooh, also get to that in a moment too. Right? So you have to pick up the slack. Or maybe you work with someone who's an underperformer and you feel like you need to pick up the slack. Let's talk about that. Okay. Actually, let's just talk about that now. We're not going to talk about it in a moment. We're going to talk about it now. Okay. Underperformers, picking up the slack. Right. Why do we do that? Because we feel like the world will end if something doesn't happen the way it should. Now, tune in. If you're tuning in live, just pop in the comments if you like, if this is true for you. We pick up the slack because we feel like the world is going to end, or something's going to go wrong, or something bad is going to happen if whatever it is isn't done. Now, if it's government reporting and you're going to get fined, yes, probably something bad will happen, right? In a lot of cases, maybe not. And I know, stick with me. So what happens is when we continually pick up the slack for an underperformer, that starts to become the norm of behavior. And that sends a message to leadership, not consciously, it's unconscious. They're not thinking, oh, so-and-so is picking up the slack, therefore we just don't need to hire another resource. They're doing it. It also happens that way. Unless it means you're going to lose millions of dollars or get fined a tremendous amount of money, etc., unless the risk is higher, again, do a cost benefits analysis. Allow some things to fall through the cracks. If it's not yours to pick up, why are you picking it up? Because you're enabling that whoever it is. Now, I've run across this situation very, very recently with my significant other. And he had someone in his spectrum that wasn't doing their part, wasn't meeting deadlines, wasn't even providing information as requested. Nothing was happening. It was like, what happens over there? Is that a black hole? What's going on? Stuff goes in, nothing comes out. I don't know. So what do we do? Well, in his case, he needed to have some conversations with other leaders to help understand how this person could be dealt with, put on a PIP, what have you, because it's been an ongoing problem for quite some time. Now he's in a position of doing that. What if this is a teammate? What do you do? Well, again, cost benefits analysis. It's not that we ever want to say, well, that's not my job. Well, on the flip side, it really isn't your job. And my friend, if you keep picking up that slack, unless the leadership goes, well, Amy over here isn't doing it, so you need to do it, Tom or Mary or whoever, right? So we have someone here who said, Cornelia says, I have absolutely struggled with picking up the slack of others. A good coworker pulled me to the side and helped me see the behavior wasn't helping our work situation. Amen. Thank you for sharing, Cornelia. So yes, it actually enables this behavior. Again, cost benefits analysis. As a leader, you might go, oh, geez, well, if this work doesn't get done, we get fined, $500 million or what have you. Well, that's a little different. And can you have that conversation with that individual? First with open, lack of judgment, open curiosity. Hey, this is what we needed to have happen. I thought that was communicated clearly. Was there a disconnect? Or share with me, what's going on? Because sometimes these people, if they are sideswiped by personal situations, maybe if they're not direct reporting to you, another manager may have reprioritized their time. So there's a lot of things that can happen. And sometimes it's just this person is overwhelmed. Now, slight segue. I will say that we are experiencing right now more teammates and people that work for us being more overwhelmed than normal. And why is that? Again, I'll connect us back to as I started the show when I talked about disaster fatigue. It impacts everybody differently and at different levels, okay, depending on how traumatic the experiences of 2021 and probably part of 2022 actually were for them. There's an impact, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, my friends, there is a huge impact. Based on my studies, of course, I'm a neuroscience nerd. Of course, I'm going to go look at the research. So, yeah, that's the first thing I did. March of 2020, we went into lockdown. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to study the effects of isolation. So I did. What did I find? Oh my gosh. Cognitive function. So our ability to process, solve problems, etc. Prioritize, yada, yada. The executive functions of our brain would decline between about 27%. I saw all the way up to 38%. Emotional intelligence. I saw numbers going up to 40 some percent of a decline in emotional intelligence. Tribalism or narrow-minded thinking, a lack of neuroplasticity, if you will. So all those things are not necessarily the same. Tribalism is not a lack of neuroplasticity, and it is also a narrow-minded thinking. In other words, really coming into what you know, what you like, believe, and etc., and everything else is the enemy. Okay, that increased exponentially. So all that's going on, okay, then you have the impacts of long-term stress, which our brain and body is simply not designed to handle. It's not. We're designed to handle short-term stress. Woolly mammoth charging your direction. We're designed to handle short-term stress, fight, flight, freeze, what have you. That is it. Long-term stress, we haven't evolved to handle that. This is a very recent, very modern phenomenon. Very modern. It's not even a speck on the human timeline yet. Just isn't. So we are not designed to handle that yet. We may be designed to handle it in the future, not right now. What happens is disaster fatigue, prolonged periods of uncertainty, economic strife, etc., multiple levels of ambiguity, which is not something we're designed to handle. We're just not designed to handle it. So we get exhausted. We're literally emotionally exhausted individuals. So something that normally pre-pandemic, you might be able to go, yeah, I can handle that. I know it's just a season. Let me get that done. Now, no, not so much. So tune in if this is something that you're seeing as well, or maybe even experiencing personally. I know that sometimes I'm like, well, I look around going, yes, I'm managing a lot. I get that. But none of this is astronomical. I mean, I helped put Chevron in the Enron buildings, for those of you who are old enough to remember what Enron was. But yeah, I put Chevron in those buildings downtown. I was one of those project managers. That was a massive project. Nothing I'm doing right now is bigger than that. Millions of dollars per floor. Well, I don't know. So it's like, and yet this seems very overwhelming. Why? Well, because there's this steady state drain of our energy level already. Okay, now I'll come back to the focus of our conversation now that I did that little segue. So again, understanding that taking up the slack for others enables them, and also balance, right? What can we do in empathy, non-judgmental way to understand the situation better, not condoning behavior. We're not saying, oh, sure, be lazy. I don't care. No, that's not the point. And what can we do to better understand that situation without enabling that individual? And as a leader, these are some of the stickiest times too. Managing underperformers, that is a huge, huge, huge sticky issue because you've got maybe HR involved, and most leaders don't want to go there. They don't want to have the conversation. And I'll share with you something else. Remember what I said about feedback earlier, and we can't grow as a person without feedback? That's just how we're designed. Guess what? Without feedback to this individual that maybe you're reluctant to have the conversation with, you're not helping that person grow. So maybe look at it that way. Now, we've talked about a few things: cost benefits analysis, how you touch base with your team. That's another thing. Touching base with teams, it takes time. A lot of leaders are like, oh, I know I need to touch base with my team. It takes so much time. Ugh. Well, there's a beautiful thing called a 5-minute stand-up meeting. It's very structured that you can leverage. And I also pop that in the show comments on YouTube and in LinkedIn. So the Forbes article I wrote around the power of stand-up meetings and why some meetings are a waste of time. Because we know that we need to spend more time one-on-one with people, particularly now. And moving into the future, based on the information that I have right now, this one-on-one leader as coach work style is the future of work. So developing yourself as leader as coach, making space for that necessary one-on-one time is really important. So how can you insert yourself into these team meetings in a more effective way to where your time is better spent and they get what they need from you, and then you can move on to the next part of your day? Because the biggest waste, and share with me if you agree, is getting on a Zoom meeting, you're sitting there. I don't know how people multitask with a bunch of people yakking at you, because you have to have a part of your brain that's alert to where, oh, Aaron, can you tell us about so-and-so? And you're like, oh, yep, sure, yes, blah, blah, blah. And you're trying to multitask doing something else at the same time, because this meeting is like 45 minutes to an hour and you're going to be called upon once. What? Moving into the future of work, we have to address this. And some of the leaders that I coach have been able to successfully implement, depending on the company culture, right? They successfully implement a structure by which, leveraging technology, they can have people come in at appropriate times on the agenda. So they're not sitting there for an hour or longer for, 5 minutes of response time. Now, sometimes you need to hear what's going on as well. Other times, maybe not so much. Now, another top tip, tactic you can take or explore is, what are you holding on to that someone else can do 80% as well as you can? That's a huge thing for leaders, particularly if you're a high achiever, you have a high standard of output. Chances are, my friend, be honest, you're holding on to more than you should. Now, I'm not advocating you go dump on other people. And are there some resources now in a more shared work environment? More people are a little bit open. Perhaps there's someone else that is an expert in so-and-so, or maybe there's someone else who has bandwidth to do something. Yes, when this happens, if you're working in a team environment and you're sharing workload with other team members, that means it might come back around, so be prepared. And as a leader, are you holding on to something maybe you don't need to? And is that empowering or disempowering your team? So think about it. Last but not least, if you're strapped for resources, a lot of people are, can you articulate the operational cost or revenue detriment to not having the resources that you need? Communicating the impact to potential revenue helps to get the resources you need. So if you can draw a line, connect the dots, I highly recommend that you do so, because there is a cost to poor output for people being stressed. There is absolutely a huge operational cost, and there's a huge operational cost to poor leadership. So if you're not able to show up 100% and lead your team as you would prefer to have them be led, there's a cost to that. There's actually a revenue cost to that. And there are other paradigm shifts required in order for our current corporate structures to align with where we're going in the future of work. And for leaders, my friends, you set the stage. And it's likely things are changing. However, you may not know what to tackle first. And my recommendation is start with you first, because once you get clear and you're aligned, then you can be more creative. Because when you're in a high level of stress, and most of us are in that state at some point during the day, you may not be in this full on, oh my God, I'm going to die. But you would be amazed maybe to understand that the fight, flight, freeze, that survival mode, is triggered throughout the day for you. And you may not even be aware of it. And when that happens, it is in direct opposition to being curious and creative. That's a simple evolutionary fact. You cannot be creative and curious when you think your survival's at threat. And by the way, it's not a black or white thing. It's not an all or nothing where oh my gosh, I'm going to die or everything is great. No, it fluctuates throughout the day. You got to present at a meeting. Did I get that put together? Did I get the thing right? That's a level of being in survival mode. And you may find it harder to articulate. That's a direct outgrowth of being in that mode. So it's important to take those, what I call power pauses throughout the day to get yourself out of survival mode, back into the parasympathetic nervous system so you can actually think and show up the way you want to, my friends. Now, I know there's lots of demands on your time. So set boundaries, focus on self-awareness, and as you evolve these other skill sets, try to set the right tone and have a healthy balance in your life as much as you can and communicate. You're moving it forward into the future of work. It's really interesting. We've always talked about, communication is so important. Well, it's even more important now than ever because we're reading more. We're using different communication methodologies more than we ever have before. So my deepest wish for you, my friends, is to keep elevating. And remember, my friends, you cannot give what you don't have. So keep elevating and invest in you. And it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you today. If you're tuning in live, it's good to see you. And if you're watching the replay later, don't hesitate to reach out. Feel free to reach out. Again, this show is for you and to help you. If you have questions, you know where to reach me at coacheurban.com, or also head over to my YouTube channel and check that out and be the first in line by subscribing to knowing what new events and workshops and other types of exciting things coming this year. Good to see you. Great to see you, David, as well, tuning in. Take care, my friends. Bye for now.